Welcome to our 76 Capital Leadership Series. My name is Wayne Kimmel, Managing Partner of 76 Capital, and really excited to have a great guest on our show today. We have the legendary David Falk, the super agent to incredible people like Michael Jordan and Patrick Ewing and Alonzo Mourning and Dikembe Mutombo and so many others, including coaches like John Thompson, as well as Mike Krzyzewski. And he's truly the mastermind behind the Jordan brand. Excited to talk with him about all the things that are happening within what he's done over the years, as well as what's happening in the NBA and basketball in general today.
We came up with Air Jordan. It was an instant success. And we signed the deal. And within 5 days of training camp starting, maybe 10, the NBA sees him wearing that first pair of shoes, and they banned the shoe. Strasser calls me and goes crazy. He says, God, are we effed? I said, relax. He said, David, they just banned the shoe. We making the shoe and he can't wear it. I said, Rob, you couldn't script this better. We're gonna do in the next 48 hours a banned in Boston commercial. He said, what the hell does that mean? I said, it means that these shoes are so amazing, you know, they're going to transform your game that the NBA wouldn't allow Michael to wear because it's like doping. It was like taking a performance-enhancing drug. And so when Spike Lee used to say later on, is it the shoes? And so we did a commercial immediately basically a very serious commercial. They panned down Michael, and it said, like, you know, on October 15th, Nike introduced a revolutionary basketball shoe. On October 20th, the NBA banned the shoe. Fortunately, the NBA can't stop you from wearing it. And the sales just skyrocketed. I mean, the NBA didn't intend to give us that kind of an assist. I think they were trying to enforce their own rules. Rod Thorne, who's a very dear friend of mine, who actually was the GM of the Sixers for a while, was the GM of the Bulls. And he called me in because he was very concerned about it and said, David, like, I know what you're doing. You're going to turn this guy into a tennis player. I said, exactly, Rod. That's exactly the idea. We think that on this team, which sucks, you know, he's gonna stand out so strongly that we're gonna try to market him as if he were an individual athlete. Interestingly enough, at the time, and maybe for the first 6 or 7 years of Michael's career, Gary Bettman, who's now the hockey commissioner, was in charge of NBA entertainment. And I used to go see him and say to him, Gary, you have all the sponsors and I have all the stars. We have Michael Jordan, Patrick Ewing, Dominique Wilkins, John Stockton, you know, Mourning, Mutombo, on and on. Why can't we get together and create a partnership? And his response to me, for all the people who think that the NBA created this individual marketing thing, it was exactly the opposite. He said to me, our job is not to market individual players, it's to market teams. And that was clearly true at the time. The prevailing identity of when you had teams like the Lakers and the Celtics wasn't just Magic Johnson and 11 guys. It was Magic Johnson, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and James Worthy, three of the greatest 50 players of all time. And the Celtics had Bird, Parrish, and McHale, three of the greatest 50 players of all time. On those teams, if you think about this, the ninth guy of the Lakers during that period of time was a guy who won 4 NBA scoring titles named Bob McAdoo. He was the ninth guy, didn't start. And the ninth guy on the Celtics was a center, was a pretty good center, named Bill Walton. Now, on most teams today, the ninth guy on those teams would be the second or third best player on these teams. They were just so deep, so the teams had tremendous name value. Sort of like the Yankees or the Packers or Man United. And the idea that an individual player would transcend the image of the team was unthinkable. And it happened, A, because the Bulls really were poor in his first few years, and B, because Michael was so amazingly entertaining. And he brought a totally new dimension to the game. He had his own line of clothes, he had style, he dressed well, he spoke well. He did stuff that was never before seen, you know, on the court. And so, you know, my dream when we made the deal, Wayne, I told Michael when he was 21 years old, I said, you know, down the road, you're going to meet a woman, get married, maybe you'll have some kids. And my dream is that you have a son. And when he's 14 years old, he'll be able to walk into a Foot Locker and buy a pair of Air Jordans. So that was That was 1984. That take us to 99. Now we're in 2020, and company is heading towards $4 billion in sales. It's got a credible market share in shoes over $200. They have like a 94% market share. Michael has created a fashion, icon in the shoe. He's unlike what Strauss was worried about him designing shoes. Well, he doesn't design them. He's very involved in the design. He reads magazines for colors and stitching patterns. Michael's an extremely intelligent man, and he loves the design, and he wants to wear something that he feels complements his style. So it's probably the most singularly successful affiliation endorsement in the history of sports, and something I'm very proud to have been involved in.
Really amazing. And we're here on our 76 Capital Leadership Series with super agent David Falk.
You got to put up the 11s. Put up the 11s. That's my shoe. The ones with the patent leather.
I was actually going to ask you, how many pairs do you have personally now?
There it is. Okay, so that's my closet at my house. And I built shelves to have 300 pairs of Jordans. So I get them every month. I'm on this program called the Elite Package. Those are my favorites with the patent leather. I'm going to wear those to play golf today. I have a pair of those in golf shoes.
That's awesome.
And that's my favorite model, the 11s. That doesn't mean size 11. It's the 11th iteration of the Jordans. And I wear them to work out. When I go to the gym, I go head to toe Jordan, and I tease all the people in the gym. I say, God, for an old man, you lift so much weight. He said, it's the shoes. I said, get rid of that Under Armour stuff and get some Jordan, and you'll be able to lift more. Or parents will come up to me and say, hey, my kid's 14 years old. Do you have any suggestions of how I can improve? And I said, yeah, get some Jordans. Get rid of get rid of that Adidas stuff, and get some Jordans. So it's fun. It's fun.
That's amazing. That's really incredible. I know. Listen, that program you're on, my chief of staff, James, who's running the studio, he'd love to be on that program. He's a huge fan. So one of the things, we talked about relationships, and certainly one of the relationships that I've read about and heard you talk about is your relationship was with David Stern, and David and I also were able to build late in his life a really great relationship. This is actually from our last conference that we had in November. It was one of his last public appearances, and just such an incredible man. And I'd love to hear you and all the things that you did with him over the years, and just a couple stories and memories.
Sure. Well, first of all, I've said many times, I think David Stern was the greatest commissioner in the history of sports. What he did to globalize basketball, bring it to 220 countries, and take a sport that wasn't on primetime television when the Lakers won in 80. I don't think it was on in 82, and it was incredible. Now, we were obviously on opposite sides of the fence. He's representing the league, and I'm representing individual players. And from time to time, in collective bargaining, our paths crossed. And it didn't affect our personal relationship. They did a documentary on me, and in the documentary, they asked David to describe our relationship. And he said, we were friends, but we were adversaries. We were contentious friends. That's how he described it. And for me, you have to understand, I look at the picture and say, if the players are going to own a fixed percentage of the league revenues, it's currently 50.1, who do you want managing the business so that your 50.1% share is as big as it could be? Do you want Billy Hunter, who ran the union into the ground? Do you want Simon Gordine, who didn't do a very good job with the union? Do you want Larry O'Brien, who's David's predecessor, who really didn't do that much? You want a guy like Stern, who's got the vision and the drive and the smarts, and he put together an amazing staff of unbelievably talented people. Gary Bettman, who's the number 2 or 3 guy left to run hockey. Russ Granick is a very talented guy. Val Ackerman, is now became the first female commissioner for the WNBA, and now is the commissioner of the Big East, a very, very talented woman. And so he brought all these amazing people in to help build an international brand. And while we disagreed at times, and it probably wasn't popular for him publicly to say that we were friendly, because the people think you can't be friends with someone who's on the opposite side. And I don't believe that. I think if you look at politics until maybe the Republican Revolution in 1994 with Newt Gingrich, the Speaker of the House and the most ardent Republican, if it was, Tip O'Neill, after they got done screaming on the Senate floor, they go out and have a steak together, and a scotch. And David Stern and I had a great relationship. I try to get very involved in the 11 lockout to prevent it. I thought it was the dumbest thing the players ever did. Then they had another one. They had 2 lockouts. They lost $1.25 billion because the union wasn't really honest with the players. They didn't say to them, look, you don't want to fight. So I'll tell you a great story that involves Stern. So in this lockout, in the 98 lockout, I just sold my business to SFX. And 3 weeks after I sold it, the union called a meeting for all the players and all the agents in Las Vegas to discuss the issues that might lead to a lockout. And there was a young agent who tragically died a couple of years ago at Aspen in a car accident named Dan Fagan. Very smart guy as a Yalie, very, very aggressive. And I got to this meeting a little bit late. The plane was late. And Fagan's up there saying, David Stern wants a hard cap. F David Stern. David Stern wants to reduce the percentage of the players. F David. He goes through this whole litany of issues, and he's like crowing like a peacock. So he gets done, and I stand up, and I said, Dan, let me explain something to you. David Stern is the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. If you go up to him and say, what's going on, Stern? He'll say, okay, Fagan, let's go 15. Now, after 6 rounds, every bone in your body is broken. You're bleeding out of every known and unknown orifice in your body, and you can't stand the pain. And you say, okay, uncle, I'm done. And Stern says, there is no uncle. Get back in the ring. You've got 9 more rounds of pain. And so Fagan says to me, what on earth does that have to do with collective bargaining? And so what that has to do with collective bargaining is, this is not a game. This is a multi-billion-dollar business. You don't pull David Stern's chain unless you're willing to sit the entire year out. And he said to me, okay, Big Tom, are you willing to sit the entire year out? Now, I just sold my business for a lot of money, what I thought was a lot of money. And I said, asshole, as a matter of fact, I do. I have $100 million in the bank. How about you? And he says to me, why are you being so arrogant? I said, I'm being so arrogant because you're being so stupid. Now, what did they do? Exactly what I told them not to do. They challenged Stern. They got locked out till January. I was surprised Stern let him back, that he didn't teach him a lesson, say, if you ever pull his stuff again, there's no coming back. But he was gracious. He wanted to play, and they had a shortened season. So, I thought, you have to understand that at the time he assumed control of the league, it wasn't the way it is now. Adams, just like I talked about earlier in the program, Adam Silver has a completely different personality than David, and he's inheriting a league that's in a way better position going forward. Now, he's going to have challenges, just like the pandemic, and I think Adam is an extremely talented man who will forge his own style and solve problems differently than David Stern. But when you have 30 billionaire owners, who are all very successful in their own fields, very, very headstrong, you can't run a democracy. You've got to be a dictator because otherwise they will eat you alive. And he did, in my opinion, what he had to do at that time to get the league organized and growing. And today, Adam certainly has challenges, some that, like the pandemic that no one could have foreseen. And he'll solve them in his own way, just like he solved the issue with Donald Sterling the first year on the job. That was a pretty big challenge to address an owner who had, uttered racist statements in a league that's 80% African American. But I'm a huge fan of David's. I enjoyed our relationship. I understood there were limits of how far the friendship could go publicly, but privately, we had a great relationship.
That's amazing. I mean, again, the theme of everything we've talked about here on our 76 Capital Leadership Series, with you, David, has really been about relationships. And one of your players, Roy Hibbert, was a guest of our leadership series, and I was telling him the other day that we were going to do this interview, and he has a question for you. So
okay.
let me play. We're going to play his question for you.
Uh-oh, where's the volume?
All right. Well, we got to get the volume here. Hold on. I'm going to get that for you. So, James, I got that. So here's Roy. We're gonna play this for you. Here we go.
Mr. Falk, big fan right here. Just want to say.
Wait, hold on. I'm gonna get this out. So he really had incredible things to say about you on our interview.
Big fan right here. Just want to say I'm a fan of your work, of your clients, definitely the centers that you've had in your stable. But hey, Wayne, just want to say hello again. Still owe you that dinner and everything like that, steak dinner on me. But I want to ask David, what are some of the characteristics you look for in up-and-coming players out of college that you try to get as a client? And once you get them as a client, how do you know how to funnel them into different businesses or investments? What characteristics do you look for when you try to align them with companies or opportunities and everything like that? Love you, David. Let's talk.
Great question. Okay, so I'll answer that. I'll answer the question whether I'd ask that to answer Roy specifically, and I would expand it to say if I owned a team,
okay,
and people ask me that question, what kind of players would you want to have on your team? I've told almost every owner in the league this. I would have 3 criteria. I would tell Elton Brand, who's the president of my team, who's my little brother. I love Elton like as a brother. We're very close.
He's another one who he's another guy who also, obviously, we know and just has amazing things to say about you as well.
Well, likewise. I mean, we're very, very close. Love Stefanski as well. I would say I want my players to have 3 things. Number one, I want them to have high character, because this could be a lot of pressures in your relationship. You're going to hear from a lot of outside people things that they tell you that I'm not going to agree with, that I don't think are in your best interest. So I want the person to have high character, which clearly includes loyalty. Secondly, I want the person to be very intelligent, because I think intelligent people find a way to win, not based on simply pure talent. They just find ways, they're crafty. And third, I would want them to be very skilled. I think one of the problems in the NBA today compared to Michael and Patrick's era is that the players are way more athletic and, in my opinion, way less skilled. They don't have the same basic skills because the game's change has become more of an up and down game, and it relies more on athleticism than on skills. I used to tell Dominique Wilkins when he was a client, who's a lovely guy, an incredible athlete, but not a cerebral player. And I say, Deke, as you get older, you're going to have to learn how to do things differently, because you're going to lose some of your natural athletic ability. And he'd sort of get upset with me. And I said, Deke, let me really be blunt. When you can't jump, you're not going to be able to play in the NBA. And he said, hey, what about Michael? I said, what about Michael? When Michael can't jump, he's going to be a Larry Bird. He's the most fundamentally sound player in the league that happens to have this incredible athletic ability, but he doesn't completely rely on his athletic ability to do what he does. He relies on basic basketball fundamentals. And obviously when he played into his 40s, he proved that. When Elton came back from his Achilles rupture and he came to the Sixers, I got to tell that story for your fans, because that's a great story. He wasn't quite the same physically, but he was very, very effective. So Elton had a max deal with the Clippers. That was actually a matched deal that the Miami Heat gave him, Pat Riley. I'm a huge Pat Riley fan. And Clippers had never, when Elton signed his contract with the Clippers, this will blow your mind. This is 2003. The highest deal that Donald Sterling had ever given a player, total dollars, was $14 million to a guy named Eric Piatkowski. He let every other player go. Danny Manning, Dominique Wilkins, all his good players, they all left. He had never paid anybody. So we asked the Clippers for the max. And this is after Elton had ruptured his Achilles tendon. And his beautiful wife, Shahara, had gotten pregnant with their first child, Elton Brand. And he had 1 year left on the deal. He could opt out, and he wanted to opt out. I didn't want to opt out because he just suffered a very serious injury, but he wanted a long-term deal. And the Clippers had sort of given him a wink behind the scenes that they would give him take out the last year of the deal, which was $16 million, and replace it with a 5-year deal for 70. So you give him 4 extra years for $54 million, which wasn't exactly anything to write home about. I didn't want to do it. He did. We got into a little bit of a disagreement about it. And I went to see Mike Dunleavy, who I really like, who was the GM of the Clippers. And I said, look, $70 million will not cut it. You know, I don't care what you discuss with Elton. You haven't discussed this with me. You shouldn't have been talking behind my back to my client. It's illegal. Not only is it unethical, it's illegal. And he said, well, the owner doesn't want to talk to you. I said, really? Owner doesn't want to talk to you about his best player? Could you imagine Kobe Bryant telling the GM of the Lakers that he wants to talk to Jerry Buss, and Jerry West telling him, hey, I'm really sorry, Jerry Buss doesn't want to talk to you. So I was inflamed. Now, I knew Clippers well because we had a lot of clients on the Clippers. The reason they offered him $70 million, Wayne, was because the only team in the league that had cap room was Philadelphia. They had exactly 70. So they knew no one could pay more than 70. So I left the meeting with Dunleavy. I was fried. I was so upset. And I never get mad. I never show my anger in meetings. So I just walked out, and the first person I called was Ed Stefanski. I love Ed Stefanski. He's a gentleman. He's an old school guy, really understands players. And I said, Ed, I know you have $70 million in cap room. How much do you like Elton Brand? He said, we love Elton Brand. We love everything about him, his skills, character. I said, great. How much cap room could you clear if I gave you 2 hours without destroying the team? And he said, let me work on it. Call me back literally an hour and a half later and said, we can clear just under 80. I said, okay, you clear 80 and you've got Elton. And so we signed him. And at the press conference, I coined a term. So the Clippers offered Elton $70 million. The max they could have offered him was $120 million. So they offered him just over half of what they had available to offer him. The Sixers had $80 million, and they offered him $80 million. So I coined a term called the Philly max, meaning the team gave him everything they could, and it meant everything to me. It wasn't just the amount of the money. It was the fact that they bent into a pretzel to try to accommodate us. And Peter Luco, another really great guy. I love Peter Luco. I don't think he's retired. Has he retired?
No, he's actually with the Oakvale group right now.
Oh, right. Yeah, very, very talented guy. Really talented guy. A lot of respect for Peter Luco. And so that brought Elton to the Sixers. And I think, they had a really good team with Dre, and Evan Turner is another one of our clients. But it's the kind of a thing in relationships. In the NBA, my job is not to fool people or get over on them, because you deal with the same people over and over again, and the Clippers didn't reflect the kind of relationship we should have had. You shouldn't be dealing with my client behind my back. And it came back to haunt them. They lost Elton Brand, who was their best player in his prime. And so I am a nut for relationships. I'll tell you why. And this maybe flies a little bit in the face of what you do for a living, because it's so numbers oriented, so analytical. But I think you could study pro formas every day, all day, and they all sound good. No one gives you a pro forma that doesn't look like the business is going to really take off, or the stock's not going to take off, or a fund's not going to take off. I invest in people. I think that you can go blind reading pro formas. At the end of the day, I would invest in Elton Brand all day long. I would invest in Patrick Ewing all day long. John Thompson. I've said many times, but it's really simply, if I were on the Titanic and they're lowering the lifeboats, the first guy I want on my boat is John Thompson, because I know that guy is so freaking loyal that he's going to be rowing with me. Other people may panic and they may go in a different direction. They may not be helping you, but John is a very harsh critic at times, but he's an amazing friend. He's a guy, if he's in your corner, I never question. He's very demanding, rightfully so, but he's been an amazing friend and mentor to me. And the people like Elton, Juwan Howard, Michael Jordan, Patrick Ewing, those people with me for John Lucas, Phil Ford, for 40 plus years. And I look at it that those people made me who I am. Those people created my brand. When people say you've had the success, I've had the success because these people have empowered me to speak for them and to create things for them that I couldn't have done if I had a second round pick. And that's a graduation. Michael's daughter, Jasmine, is a proud graduate of the Falk College of Sports and Human Dynamics, and that's Michael at Syracuse at graduation, reveling in the graduation of his only daughter, well, his first daughter. Now he's got twin daughters who are lovely, 6 years old.
Well, it's really amazing, David. I think that what your philosophy really lines up almost exactly with what we do at 76 Capital. I mean, we have this philosophy of working with passionate, smart, nice entrepreneurs that want to change the world and really, really do the next thing. And that's what I hear, from you when you talk about the relationships and the kinds of people that you've worked with, whether that's John Thompson, Michael Jordan, Patrick Ewing, Alonzo Mourning. I mean, Juwan Howard's a great story. We had Phil Martelli on recently, and he talked about his time, now at Michigan with Juwan. So it's really great to hear the kinds of people that you like to work with, certainly the same kinds of entrepreneurs and partners and people that we like to have at 76 Capital. It's very similar. And you have, also I've just loved to hear a little bit of your relationship with Coach Krzyzewski. I know that he's someone
Absolutely.
I have a great relationship with.
So I'll tell you, so the first time our first Duke client was Johnny Dawkins, who was really Coach K's first star recruit from Washington, D.C. Johnny came out in 1986. And I went down to meet him, to represent him, to make a presentation. Donald Dell couldn't make the meeting. And instead of saying to me, hey, good luck, knock him dead, he said, look, don't F this up. Just make sure that, we have a second follow-up meeting with Johnny, in Washington. So I go down there, and it was the first Duke had created a screening committee for the athletes. And it was a very famous law professor named John Weistart, who I knew well, Chris Kennedy, who's still there, Coach K, and I can't remember the fourth person. And they had never done it before. So I'm trying to make a coaching presentation. Every 2 minutes, so I'm talking about the draft, and the business professor says, what do you think about intangible depreciation on real estate investments? And after 10 minutes, I could see Johnny had just checked out. It was the worst, maybe the worst meeting I've ever had in my career. Not because they were intending to be difficult. They didn't know how to let the meeting flow and then come in and ask questions. And the last thing Johnny wanted to do was come back to Washington. He basically wrote us off. But Mike, it came down to us and a split off firm from our company called Octagon. And they had signed Lenny Bias. And Mike thought that it was not a good idea for Johnny and Lenny to be with the same group. So Mike sort of made Johnny come to Washington. He came up with him. And so I had a standing rule at the time. I had a young Jamaican secretary named Andrea Person. And I said to her, there are 4 people, John Thompson, Michael Jordan, Patrick Ewing, and Coach K. Never put those people on hold. Never tell them I'm in a meeting. Just find me. Let me decide if I want to take the call. So sure enough, that day I was sitting in Donald Dell's office in Washington, and John Thompson calls me up to invite me to lunch. And my secretary is in a dither. Have this rule, find me. So you got Coach K in one office, John Thompson on the phone, And she goes into a panic. And he said, look, what's going on? She says, God, Coach, I don't know what to tell you. Like, David's in the meeting with Coach K and John. Oh, no problem. I just wanted to run lunch. So we're in the middle of this meeting, and I would say there's a knock on the door. The door crashes open, and who walks in but John Thompson and his academic coordinator, Mary Fenlon. And he goes over to Johnny. You know, Johnny grew up in Washington. John is God in Washington to these young ball players through the boys club. And he said, how you doing, Johnny? Johnny says, fine, sir. How you doing? He says, hi to Coach K. They're good friends. And he points at me. He says to Johnny, this is my guy. I love this guy. If you go with him, he'll take really great care of you. And he points to Donald and he says, I don't like this guy. F this guy. And he walks out. That was it. He was there for like 1 minute. And he walks out, and I turned to Coach K and I said, Coach, you know, I'm stunned. I had no idea John was coming. You know, I'm really sort of embarrassed. It looks like we staged it for him to come and give us a promo. And Mike looks at me like I'm out of my mind and says, David, there's not a human being alive that could have gotten John Thompson to do what he just did if he didn't want to do it on his own. So like, relax. And we got Johnny, and a year later we got Tommy Amaker and Bobby Hurley, Elton Brand. And at some point along the way, Mike asked me to represent him. Now, at the time, I only had one coach as a client, which is John Thompson. And the reason I only had one is because in the early days, when shoe contracts just started, all the coaches would call up Donald and ask for advice on shoe contracts or their school contracts. And I said to Donald, stay 100 miles out of this thing. You went to law school at Virginia. Dean Smith at Carolina is worried maybe you're too close friends with Terry Holland. You're doing something for Terry Holland. Lefty Drizel was a Hall of Fame coach at Maryland, you know, has paranoia about Dean Smith because he can never quite beat Dean Smith. He knows we have a lot of Carolina players. It hurts, you know, and Dean knows you live in Maryland, and he wonders, like, are you doing anything? So if you get involved, you're going to lose all the players. So just stay the freak out of it. One day, maybe 1982, I just met John. I met John, ironically, Wade, because when John played for the Celtics, he's making literally $5,000. That was his contract. Most of the players back then had to have summer jobs to supplement their incomes, unless you were Bill Russell. And John lived with a childless family in Boston named Harold and Marty Furash. And Harold Furash was golf buddies with my father-in-law. So when I met my wife, who was from Boston, you know, Furash told John, I just met this young lawyer who loves sports, like he's a zero, and you're a high school coach moving into college, like you're a zero. You guys should meet. This was 1973. We didn't meet till 1980. So I'm having lunch with John in 82. We just started to develop a relationship. And we're having lunch at the Twin Bridge Marriott, which no longer exists in Washington. And he starts asking me about options. You know, do I think it's a good idea to take options like in his Nike contract? And I said to him, you know, John, I'd love to help you with this stuff, but we have a policy against representing coaches. And without flinching, John says, like, I don't give a goddamn blank about your policy. I'd love you to help me. And I was one of the few times in my life I was just tongue-tied. I couldn't think of something intelligent to say to respond. So I said, okay, we'll do it. And from that day in 1982, it's been 28 years, 38 years. The only players in the Big East we've had outside of Georgetown were Charles Smith from Pitt and maybe one more, and Kerry Kittles from Villanova, who was a very, very dear friend, because the coaches hated the fact we took John out of, this will blow your mind, the Big East had a group ball deal in 1982 with McGregor. So it was Raleigh, Massimino, John,
Carnesecca,
Louis Carnesecca, Connecticut, all these big-time coaches. They got $3,000 each to use a McGregor ball. I took John out of the deal, and I signed him by himself with Wilson for $25,000 a year. And they put him on the cover of SI with Patrick and Ronald Reagan, and I realized I should have gotten him 100 a year. So the coaches hated John was just doing all these things by himself. We put him in on TV shows, and they all blocked us from getting the players. They didn't dislike me. They were sort of jealous, and so they blocked us. So from 1982 to 97, John was the only coach who represented. Coach K asked me in '97 if I'd help him to do some marketing. And I said, I'm happy to do it as long as John is comfortable with it. You know, it's important to me. And John loved Mike, so he said, sure. And so we just did marketing for Mike for about 7 years. But in 2004, Mitch Kupchak called me, who's a former client, who's the GM of the Lakers. And Phil had just left the Lakers, Phil Jackson. They wanted to hire Mike to be the coach. So we had a meeting in Mike's living room, and I got the Lakers to offer him $50 million, the highest contract in any sport for a coach, high school, college, or pro. And Mitch left, and Mike said, like, what do you think? Now, he wasn't making nearly what he's making today from Duke. And I said to him, you know, it's your career, it's a lot of money, but, you know, you have your 3 daughters here. You have a very, very credible position at Duke. You're probably the most best-known person on the campus. You've got great relationship with the chancellor. You have fairly free reign because of the incredible level of success you've had. You go to the Lakers where Shaq and Kobe are about to get divorced. And, you know, I can't tell you to turn the money down, but if it were me, I'd probably stay at Duke, which he did. And the minute he agreed to stay at Duke, I realized, wow, we've got to really go to work and get him paid. And so he, at that point, allowed me to be his agent across the board. And we sat down with the Duke people the next year and literally tripled his coaching revenue and made him an incredible amount of money off the court, more than any coach in the history of sports made. And I was very proud of that. I mean, Mike's a great friend. He's been a very strong supporter. He's got an amazing program. My daughter went to Duke. His office took care of the tickets. He's a special guy and a great friend. We no longer represent him. He signed with CAA, 4 or 5 years ago, which I can't say I was thrilled about, but I told him I'd much rather be your friend than to be your agent. Like, the friendship is way more important to me.
Well, these are fascinating stories, David, and I think we could go on all day. I'd love to have you, maybe we'll do this again in another way on our 76 Capital Leadership Series. It's been awesome. I have one last question, and I think one of the things, again, you've been talking about, how important relationships are. I mean, you've also, I think, shared with everybody and all of our viewers that you got to ask for what you want in life. You got to just go for it and make that happen. It's one of the things that, I tell people all the time, just go make it happen. Like, otherwise it's just sitting on the couch. It's just nothing will happen unless you give it a shot.
Well, my mother, I mentioned to you, my mother is my life mentor. Now, when I was very young, she imbued in me a mantra that's become my life's mantra, exactly what you're describing. And she would say to me, son, always shoot for the stars and never settle for second best. Now, I've repeated that mantra, I wouldn't even say thousands of times. A very dear friend of mine named Rob Ades, who died about 5 years ago, was a labor lawyer here in Washington. He represented the Stonecutters Union, and he had somebody make, like, literally a headstone. Weighs about 400 pounds, and it says, always shoot for the stars and never settle for second best. Pearl Falk, Seaford, New York. I pad that right next to my desk, and when I have tough days or big challenges in front of me, I look down and I draw inspiration, from my mother. When my younger daughter was born, I used to hold her in my arms and feed her at night to help my wife, and I always say to her, what did Grandma Falk used to say? And she'd say, I know, always shoot for the stars. And so I think it's a great philosophy to have. And I think all successful people, last story, I'll let you go. So I just mentioned about doing Coach K's contract. So I went up to New York with Mike, literally the day after I closed his deal with Duke. And he's given a speech to Morgan Stanley. We had a contract for him with Morgan Stanley. And he gave an amazingly passionate speech to about 1,000 high net worth executives. And in his speech, he said, really successful people see obstacles as obstacles. You're going to go around them, you're going to go through them, you're going to jump over them, but they're not going to stop you from reaching your goal. Whereas the vast majority of people see obstacles as complete barriers. You see an obstacle in your path, you don't think you can get through it. So we go to dinner at this very famous restaurant in New York, Berea, in Central Park. And Mike said, God, David, I just can't even begin to comprehend what you just did for me with my contract. Like, how were you able to do that? I said, Coach, it was very simple. I just listened to your speech. I looked at the obstacles as obstacles, not as barriers. And I think that every person who's successful in life believes in themselves, and they believe that they can find a strategy. They can call on an important relationship to achieve what they want. You don't have to do it all by yourself. I said earlier, like, I feel, that there's a famous quote from Sir Isaac Newton. And he said, if I've seen farther than other men, it's because I've stood on the shoulders of giants. And in my career, that's a very literal quote. I literally have stood on the shoulders of giants, of people like Patrick and Michael, John, and others, Elton, that have enabled me to achieve my dream and to achieve, success in my industry and respected leadership. And having had the chance to teach these men about the business of sports is the most rewarding thing that I could have imagined to do in my life.
It's amazing. It's amazing what you've done. And, I get, congratulations on everything. And, we're not done, right? We're not done. So we're thinking, as you talk about, the obstacles and things that are going on in the world today with this pandemic, with all these racial tensions now, really brought to the, all the way above the surface. They've been there a long time, but it's now out. You've got the NBA players in the bubble now. Hopefully that'll all work out. What do you see for, the future of sports and in business? I mean, you've created, as you said, the biggest deal in the history of sports, with what you've done with Michael Jordan and Nike. What do you see kind of when you look at the future? What's the next thing that's going to happen?
Well, there's a tremendous growth because of technology. Technology is going to change sports. It's going to change the way people view sports, the way they absorb sports. Gambling is could become a huge integral part of sports. Virtual reality. I'm involved with a company in California called Ostendo that has an amazing what they call quantum photonic technology that I think is going to change the way fans consume sports in a very revolutionary way. And I'm trying to introduce them to different companies that I have relationships with, in both in sports and in media. Because in gaming is another enormous area. I think down the road, I'm not sure that what we would say is the peripheral part of sports now won't overtake the traditional part of sports. Young people have different habits. They're going to watch a game and they're going to create fantasy teams on their phone, regardless of who's on the court. I think the changes over the next 10 years will be more dramatic than everything that's happened from the first time sports was televised, whenever that was in the 50s. It's going to be a revolution, and it's going to be fun.
Yeah, well, it absolutely is. And it's all the things that we invest in and look at 76 Capital, whether it's esports, whether it's sports betting and the media side of things, all the next things. And hopefully we'll get a chance to do more things with you and Garrett and your whole team. Really look forward to that. And again, David, just thank you so much for joining our 76 Capital Leadership Series.
I really enjoyed it. I think we could have done this for hours.
Absolutely. I love your stories. So many more things. I know that it's just exciting to hear all the things that have happened. And again, the other big thing, we talked about The Last Dance for a minute, but it was also one of the most incredible, docuseries in sports ever. I mean, it was the #1 ever. Another huge thing that you've done in the sports business world. So congratulations on all the things that you've done. Hopefully we'll get to do things together in the future and do even more to make sports an even better business.
I look forward to it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And David, appreciate it. And you can find all of our 76 Capital Leadership Series shows on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and also on our YouTube channel that you can subscribe to and see all of these great interviews. Today was really special having David Falk, the super agent who has represented Michael Jordan, Patrick Ewing, Alonzo Mourning, Dikembe Mutombo, John Thompson, Mike Krzyzewski, and the list goes on. Thank you so much for watching, and everyone, please have a great day.